Everybody doing? All right. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Kevin Burke. I work at a company in San Francisco called Ship, which unfortunately doesn't have any consumer documentation. But I used to work at Twilio, which definitely has a ton of it. And I used to just ask people to try to send an SMS to their phone and watch them sort of struggle to use our docs and learned a bunch from that. And I'm going to be talking about that a lot today. So let's get started. This talk's going to be about why people don't read your documentation. It's going to be about how you can write the best docs in the world and people still won't find them or use them or be able to take advantage of them. And it's going to teach you how to get more effective at actually helping solve your users' problems, getting started with your tools. This is not a talk about people that are actually illiterate, which is a really interesting problem, but not in scope today. All right, so I know people aren't reading your docs. They're not reading your docs because no one reads anything on the internet, right? I think it's fair to say when something makes it to the Onion that it's a pretty well-known phenomenon. Anyway, the sort of canonical resource for this, at least the short one that's easy to look at, is How Users Read on the Web. It's by Jacob Nielsen, who writes at useit.com, and there's a ton of really good content there. It was written, I think, like 17 years ago or something like that, but it's still really relevant today, especially when people have push notifications and all kinds of stuff and mobile devices, and they're trying to do 7 different things at once. The basic gist of the article is that people don't read, they scan. So here's an eye tracking study. These are 3 different pages, so basically they just ask people to do some task like find an Indian restaurant near your house or figure out what events are nearby or something. And then they just watch people as they sort of browse through the page and watch where their eyes went, right? And you can see people start in the top left of every page. They scan across, maybe they go down, scan across one more time, go down, scan across one more time, and then down the left-hand side, sort of an F shape, right, if you want, which is interesting to look at, and it's also interesting to see how much of this text is just ignored, right? Like all this stuff over here is just not being read. There's a big image in the middle there that's just being completely ignored. So what do people actually look at? They look at meaningful text and images. They look at the beginnings of paragraphs. You can read this list. It's also good to think about what they're not looking at, right? They're not looking at big blocks of text, right? If you've got 2 ideas in a paragraph, the second idea is going to get buried in the middle of that paragraph. Just add a new line and split it out into its own paragraph. Or try to trim as much fat as you can from your writing. One study says you should try to make it about half as short, your web writing versus your offline writing. Links, bullets, code snippets, bold, all really, really good stuff that you should be using. So this is another example from the same article. It's the same text on the left and the right. And I'm sorry if you can't read it, the shapes are more important than the actual text here. But which one would you rather read? Just going by the shapes. The left one, right? That's pretty easy. They did a quiz later. This is about like state parks in Nebraska, and they said, okay, which of these state parks are actually in Nebraska, like testing reading comprehension, that sort of thing. How much better do you think the version on the left performed versus the version on the right? 82%? Twice? So it was 125% better, 2.25x as effective in terms of like actually getting people to retain the information on the left-hand side, right? So it's shorter, right? There's less text there, so it's easier to read. And also everything lines up really nicely on the left-hand column, right? So if I'm scanning down the left-hand side, I can just read all the information that I need, where here I need to jump around and really pay attention and focus on all these unfamiliar names and words. Okay, so let's look at some examples of this, good and bad, on people's documentation and see what we can learn from this. So here's the first example. This is a readme.txt on GitHub. So if you make a README file with no file extension, or you do readme.txt, it shows up in this fixed width format. This might have changed recently. This is old. But yeah, it's just really hard to sort of like read this and scan it, right, and pick out any information from it. You kind of have to read the whole thing, because every letter is the same width. There's no formatting, right? There's no bold. There's no, font weight changes. So it's hard to sort of scan, right? If you're writing READMEs for GitHub or that sort of thing, use the Markdown format, use the restructured text format, because then you get bold, then you get headings, then you get links. You get all these things that are really useful cues for your readers when they're browsing your text. Here's another example. So people tend to skip over things that look like ads. Is there anything on this page that looks like an ad? The bright red, right? The irony here is that this is the point that we wanted to call out the most. And like people would just skip right over it, right? When we were testing, is like they'd run into this error and it'd be called out right here, and people just completely skip right over it. So probably a betterment here would be just make this text red, make the background white, or put a little like exclamation point icon next to it on the left side. Then you can sort of, hey, this is something you need to pay attention to, versus making it look like an ad. Here's another one, right? This text is kind of okay, but it's just too wide, right? Like if I'm scanning all the way across and then scanning down the left-hand side, like I'm missing all of this kind of text over here, right? If you're making your text 65 to 90 characters wide, the way it is in most books, for example, you're going to get a lot of fixations on the left-hand side. It's going to help your users sort of scan and see what's going on in your docs versus stuff that just fills the page no matter how wide it is on these 24-inch monitors and everything. Okay, so this is an example from a quick start that we had. This is like the entire text of the page. So it's talking about like initiating a call. You're expecting to read something here about how to make calls, but it's kind of confusing because there's no code snippets, and you might search around and be like, well, this page is kind of useless, right? And then it turns out what you really needed was this link down at the bottom, right, which isn't really clear at all. It's the same size as the other text. It's all the way down at the bottom of the page. It doesn't really have a great information sent. So if you're scanning this page, you're going to totally miss that and try to jump somewhere else, completely unrelated to find an answer to your question. Better would be to make it like a button, or even better, just put all the content on one page and make it kind of indexable. All right, so this is GitHub. This is like actually pretty good. It's really short. The biggest paragraph is 2 sentences. There's really big headings. It's really easily broken up into a bunch of different sections. You can see here down at the bottom, they've got this little expando content for like stuff you don't need to read, but you might be curious about, but it's hidden by default. The other thing that I really like about this is it's sort of ordered, right? It's got headings right in or numbers right in the headings, right? So let's say I think I'm really good at SSH and I skip down to step 4 and I type stuff in and it doesn't work, right? It's a pretty good hint that I need to go back and read steps 1 through 3, right? Especially if I'm scanning this page and I go straight down, it's a good cue that I need to go back up to the top and read from the top again. I like this one too. Heroku has these really, really big pages. I kind of like it because this is all the important stuff that you need to read, and it's right there at the top of the page. So you can get right to where you're trying to go in that page pretty easily, right? And they've broken it up. So this is the important part. It's all aligned on the left-hand side. They could work on their information sense a little bit. Like here it says, store your app in Git, right? Where Git is kind of the important word there. Like I'd move that closer to the beginning of the line where possible. Like use Git to track your versions or something. But otherwise, yeah, it's a pretty good example. Okay, so users don't read anything. They're also really bad at searching. So a lot of studies have found that like if people try typing stuff into Google or searching and they can't find what they're looking for, like they don't try other queries, or people that do are rare, right? They just give up, right? They assume the information is just not available. This is a quote from Jeff Atwood, who used to one of the founders of Stackoverflow, where they used to close a lot of questions as duplicates. If they had the same answers, they'd be like, oh, this question already exists. what they realized is if people were sort of using different words to ask the question, they had different mental models about how these things worked or how these things work, what questions, what answers they needed to find. And that was providing a lot of value, right? Because anyone searching for those sort of words was going to hit on this answer, get the answer they needed, right? So even though the answers were duplicated, right, it was still very useful for people that were coming in and searching for it because everyone had sort of different mental models about how this stuff worked and were at different phases of their growth as developers and this sort of stuff. So they used to be really aggressive about closing duplicates and now are a little bit more tolerant of that. So this is an example from Twilio where we have these sort of like client wrappers around our HTTP API. And people use all sorts of different words to refer to these. But if someone was searching for, client SDKs and you're referring to them as helper libraries on your site, they might totally miss it, right? So you need to think about the types of words that your users are using and the mental models that they have of how your system works, right? And then match your text to sort of match that, right? Or your searches are going to fail. And the ways you can sort of find that, just read through your support queries, see what people are asking about, like how do I do this thing? And read through your like Google Analytics search logs. You'll see what people are sort of searching for there and what terms they're coming from Google to get. So here's another example from our site. If a user is asking, how do I forward a number to my cell phone? They bought a Twilio number, they want to just forward it to wherever their actual phone is, somewhere in the world. And your docs say, how to do everything with an incoming call, right? This is where the answer actually is, but it's not really geared to what the user's trying to do, right? Like if I'm looking for something around call forwarding, I might not associate that with an incoming call, right? Better to sort of have targeted pages and targeted words, and then take people to where they want to go. So on our docs page, on the home page, sorry, Twilio, I don't work there anymore. We made it so we just added a ton of verbs in here, right? Like here's all the different things you can do with Twilio and here's where you need to go to find the answers to all these questions. In a lot of cases, these just go to the same page, right? But we're trying to just match whatever you're searching for on that list and get you to go to the right place anyway. Okay, no one reads anything above or below code snippets. This is another thing I found from user testing. If you see a code snippet and you're trying to run something, it's like hitting the gold mine, right? But you never read. You just people just copy paste it, try to run it, and it leads to messy things. So let's look at an example. This is from our docs, or was from the Twilio docs a while ago. There's a bunch of things that are wrong here, right? If I try to copy and paste and run this, like I'm going to be in a world of pain. So the first thing is there's like two ways to create a client, right? One is you set sort of credentials in your environment, right? Like you use environment variables, and then they get read from here, right? So you don't need to hard code your credentials and strings and stuff. But if you just tried to run this and you didn't have those environment variables set, it would complain that like you're missing credentials and all this stuff. That's implicit, right? It's not documented anywhere. You're going to get really confused if you get an error message. There's a typo, right? Depressingly common in documentation. But again, your user is going to be totally confused, right? They're trusting you. They're trying to get something to run that's on your site and running into a typo, right? And they don't know how to fix it at this point, right? This is like the very, very beginning of getting started with your service. They don't know like what they don't know, about like how things work and how to find answers to their problems, right? So this is really depressing when you're running something that's from the person's site and they can't even get it to work properly, right? And you don't know what that should be, right? It might be messages, you might try that, it might work, but you don't know, right? It's a messags. Name error, right? So we forgot the require line at the top. This is Ruby, right? So we forgot the require line at the top, which basically like loads Twilio into the namespace, right? So you're gonna miss that, right? And then you might try gem install Twilio, which would be wrong. Or you might, search around for how to do that. And again, it's just not a great experience, right? For how it's going on, right? So 3 different things that go wrong, right? So you type one, you get it wrong, you Google how to fix it, you fix it amazingly, right? You get another typo, right? Google around for how to get it wrong, maybe fix it, get a third error, right? And by this point you're like, okay, forget this, So this is really, really, really frustrating. This is sort of better, right? So here we have require Twilio Ruby. One thing I found from user testing is a lot of people are not familiar with like gems and pip package managers and stuff. So we have instructions on how to install that kind of thing. Like, it's not really your problem, but it is, if people can't figure out how to use it. So we have sort of information there, and if you get a permission denied error, use sudo and all this stuff. Here we have your credentials. We're like embedding them into the page. We actually have Twilio has a neat bit of JavaScript that will take this and rewrite it with your actual account credential. So like you can actually paste this and run it, and that'll work, which is pretty neat. And then that one we fixed a typo. So yeah, and then once we did this, we actually just started embedding them right into the page, which is neat, right? So here we have all these snippets that are totally runnable. This is a big project I worked on, is making these. Actually, like every code snippet, like you can just copy paste it and run it, right? And there's like a test framework that runs around it. I gave a talk about this at TwilioCon 2 years ago. There's a link in the slides which I'll send you if you're interested in that sort of thing. Sometimes copy and paste can go a little bit too far. So here we have in our docs, we have gem install Rails, right? And then someone tries to run this and they get command not found $, right? Because they accidentally copied the $ at the beginning. And it turns out this is really, really hard to Google for, because like the $ just doesn't show up, right? So you're like wondering what went wrong. And I don't have great suggestions here about how to fix this. One I've seen is like separating out like the command input from the output, right, in like 2 separate code boxes. But yeah, it's tricky, right? And this is something that trips a lot of, especially like newbie programmers up, is just $at the beginning. Okay, so I thought it might be useful to walk through like from end to end, like what this sort of looks like. So let's look at an example user failure and sort of see like how our documentation failed or succeeded at answering their question. So here's an example error. You run the Twilio Ruby library on your server and you get this error, right? Like this is actually something that happened. Does anyone know what this is, actually? Certificate failure, yes. So you run this on some server, the server's got an outdated certificate list, it can't connect to Twilio because Twilio has a newer certificate, and it fails, right? Perfectly legitimate reason to want help, right? Okay, so what are you gonna do if you get this error, right? You just try to run Twilio in your console. Like, what is the next step? Like, what are you immediately going to do? Copy paste where? To Google. Yes. You're going to copy paste and search in Google. Okay, so let's see what happens if we search on Google for this thing. We type Ruby in Twilio just to filter the results a little bit, and we get this big list, and looks like there might be something useful here. And so we look more closely, right? The first answer is from Stackoverflow. The second answer is from Stackoverflow. The third answer is from a forum that no one actually checks. The fourth answer is from a third-party Twilio library, right? May or may not have useful information, may or may not solve the problem. And the fourth one is from a blog post, right, about like getting started with Twilio and all this stuff. Okay, none of these are your docs, right? So, like you could write the most awesome documentation, like to just solve, like perfectly just knock out the person's question, and like they wouldn't even see it, right? Like they wouldn't even get there. So sometimes your job when you're sort of writing this stuff and reaching out to users might be like, you can't just go on your site, right? Like you need to be able to go out, fix things where users are, right? Fix things where users are going. Let's look at some more examples of this. So here's an API that I found. To access the developer portal, you need to sign in or register, right? So the problem is, say I'm trying to develop with this API, and I get an error or a failure, I want to find out how something works. I punch it into Google, and I'm never going to get any results from this page because we put it behind a login wall, right? So I think at one point, like 50% of our hits at the Twilio docs were coming straight from Google. So that's like 50% of your traffic you're just like ignoring or sending off to other sites to try to find answers to. Here's another example. Download PDFs to get the docs, right? Like Google is really bad at searching PDFs, right? And even if the answer isn't a PDF, it's like hard. You have to download it and update Adobe Reader and all this stuff. So it's hard to find, right? And if you're used to generating docs, it can be hard to put them online. It can require you to rewrite your flows, but like this is just not searchable, right? Again, think about 50% of your traffic you're just throwing away, right? Or directing the things that are not your site, right? To not great experiences. So here's WikiHow, right? The important thing is like this is search traffic, right? And search traffic is valuable, right? So we actually saw this. WikiHow is like posting articles on how to validate requests from Twilio, right? Like if you don't have documentation on this and you're big enough, like WikiHow will put up a page on how to do it, right? And they'll steal your traffic. So like you don't want people to go here, right? Like this is not a good experience, right? You don't want this to happen. So make sure your docs are good. Like your docs should beat WikiHow, right? Like you own Twilio.com. Like you should be able to win in that case. You just need to have the content that like matches what users are searching for, right? And you need to use the words that they're using and not put it behind a login wall or anything like that. Here's another example, Stackoverflow. So a lot of what I did, not a lot, but a fair amount, just like editing people's questions, right? Like just cleaning it up, right? Just making it sort of like an actual question that might match someone else that comes in and finds the same question. Just clean it up, right? Just make it like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm trying to do that same thing. And then answer it too, right? If you can answer it, that's great. Just answer that question. You've created a resource that's valuable for your users, right? It's not on your site, but it is where people are going, right? People really trust Stack Overflow, and people ask really badly formatted questions, right? So it can kind of reflect badly on your service, so like clean it up, like edit Stack Overflow, like go ahead. It's super, super easy. You get like points for doing it. It's fun. Okay. All right, if the user's getting an error message a lot, put the exact text in your documentation, right? This is how you get the Google juice for that query. Google has like some string matcher, and they say, oh, this string matches exactly what the user just typed in, so that's probably a good idea, good indication that your page has the answer to their question. So here's an example from Google Closure Compiler, right? If you try to compile some JavaScript with Google Closure and it fails, you're going to get two things. You're going to get this like error constant, which is what they call the error internally. You're also going to get the exact like human readable text of the error in the console. So if you type this in, shift amount out of bounds, number, and then ship amount, you are going to get, you copy paste it right into Google and you're going to get to this page, right? Like I guarantee it. So that's a really good practice, right? Just sort of keep that, right? Like if you have like error codes, like maybe use words you can search for. Codes are a little hard to search for, but like constant strings like that are super easy. Like nothing else is gonna, the chances are zero of someone just randomly generating that string, on some other unrelated site. Okay, validation is documentation. So if people are getting an error message a lot, maybe we can improve the error message to make it better, right? Then they don't even need to go to Google to go find your docs. They can just learn the answer to their question and fix it. So this is from a service called hurl.it, which Twilio used to own. It's now owned by Runscope. It's basically like a URL fetcher. So you type in a URL and it goes and fetches it for you and shows a bunch of stuff about the request. So this is what the error message used to look like. It says if the URL is invalid that the user gave us, display this error message. That's wait what, right? With the confused question mark. Not very useful, right? If I just hit enter without entering a URL, or I'm using like this as an API and I get this error message back, it's not really helping me solve that problem, right? This is a little bit more useful. Sorry, this is hard to read. If they didn't send a URL, please include a URL, right? The error was you didn't include a URL, right? If it's invalid, then tell them it's invalid, right? And I always like putting whatever the input was like back in the error string, right? A lot of times people run into this by mistake, right? Like they might be passing null to your API, right? Or something like that, or like undefined or any of these other things. So if you tell them URL null is invalid, they're gonna be, oh, okay, I sent null to the API and that was the problem, right? If you just tell them URL is invalid, then you have to go trace down like where this null is being generated and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, so we can tell people, we can sort of help people figure out what's wrong, right? And we can go a step even further than this. So let's say I type in google.com and I don't have a scheme, like I don't have HTTP or HTTPS at the front, right? We can try to add it, right? So we can say the URL is invalid. If we put HTTP on the front and it suddenly becomes valid, then we can just append the string that says, did you mean HTTP, this URL, right? And then you can be like, oh yeah, I meant it, and then fix your site, and then you're all happy again. And then you don't even need to go to Google and possibly go to a forum or Stackoverflow or any of that, right? Okay, so you can fix these, yes you, the non-technical person in the audience. The good news is, error messages tend to be kind of overlooked sometimes. But people who are just focusing on the logic and the correctness of it, right? They can be like, oh, we rejected invalid URLs, right? And not, oh, we actually made it so that people can fix these, right? Strings are really easy to search for, right? So if you go to GitHub search, you can just, if you see a string on the page, right? Odds are that string is in a code somewhere, right? And you can search for it, right? And then change it, right? It's pretty not easy. I don't know. Nothing's easy, but yeah, it's easier, right? You can probably do this and then edit and submit a pull request all within the GitHub user interface. You can find strings. You can use the Finder in Mac to find strings and that sort of thing. And it tends to be it's a good way to sort of get started with a code base. Just trying to improve error strings, right? And improve error messages and make them kind of better in the sense. So yeah, that's a good way to get started with a code base and learn how to make changes and stuff. Okay, takeaways. Make your documentation readable, right? Break up the text. The first 3 to 5 words are the most important. Put the most important stuff right on the left-hand column. Use bold, use links. Don't make it too wide. Write less words for the web. Care about SEO, right? You need to think about Google. 50% of your users are coming from there. Your documentation should win, right? You own the canonical resource for that, or your company does, right? That should win as long as you're using the words that users are using and you make it sort of indexable by Google, right? But they have this 60, 70 page Google guide. It's linked here if you go and find the slides, which I'll send you a link to. Really, really useful stuff and pretty easy to just fix, right? So yeah, URLs to describe the content, don't use ugly URLs. Your users can potentially land on any page or any site, right? And that area needs to hold up on its own. So if they're just land without any context right on a code snippet, right? Be ready for that to be the user's entry point to your docs, right? They're not going to the home page and browsing, right? They're going straight from Google to the information they want, and you need to be ready for that, right? Everything needs to sort of stand on its own. Making it better, yeah. Look at the actual tasks the users are trying to solve. Users should be hiring your docs, right? They should be hiring things that you're writing, right? And it's not just going to be your docs. It's going to be Stackoverflow. It's going to be the error messages that you get in the terminal or in your server logs. It's going to be, so that sort of stuff, right? And if you can fix it, right? For the SSL certificate issue, we ended up just shipping SSL certificates with the library, right? So you can't run into that issue anymore because you're just using the up-to-date certificate. If you can't do that, make the error messages really, really good, right? Make them solve the problem. Think about that if you're a technical writer. Try to get access, search for these strings, make them better, right? Help people solve problems, help them help themselves. That's it. Thanks very much. Sorry, I guess it's a little bit hard to read. It's kev.inburke.com/slides/documentation if you want to check out the slides. And thanks for listening. This is great.